control of letting people in, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
Meeting is now live on Facebook.
Hello,
We're trying to keep it as close we can to an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, get some stuff going, and you can let people in.
Check, and I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing the live stream to different groups on Facebook.
Cool.
The band will now return to the stage. I repeat, the band will now return to the stage. Pipe majors are always like this, 2 more minutes to tune those drones. Get that last F, that last D. I think you're waiting in the wings, ladies and gentlemen. We were going to revert back to the order of the program. We kind of slipped that drum fanfare in a little bit out of order. When the band comes back, they're going to play another of their celebrated medley. Much as medley playing is this band's reputation, it was not with the medley that they won the World Championship in 1987, but it was by getting first in the traditional music, the March, Trespay, and Reel competition that gave them the coveted World Championship title. Here in this medley that you'll hear, and if you look at the program, you can see that many of the tunes are traditional tunes or tunes by composers not of the last 10 or 15 years. And they show again here their ability to present this traditional music in an exciting form with tempos and percussion accompaniment to lift the audience out of their seat. So here again is the 78th Fraser Highlanders pipe band under Pipe Major William Livingston playing Michael Gray's Flesh Market Close.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, just want to welcome everybody April 22nd, 2021 to the Southern Branch Town Hall. I know that we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and all other streaming channels. Really look forward to the discussion tonight with Mr. Michael Gray. We're going to start off with just some general announcements for the branch. Kenny's going to give a short update after that, after Andrew, and then any questions that anybody has in regards to branch business or to the EC business. Love to field some questions if anybody has any. If not, then we'll jump into the discussion with Michael Gray. So I'm going to pass it over to Andrew to give general business updates.
Hey, thanks, Michael. Evening, guys. Hey, I just want to follow suit with branch communications. We do receive emails from members, and we do our best to respond, hopefully within 72 hours. Sometimes we're out of pocket, traveling or taking care of family, so we may overlook or miss. Please don't take that as any slight. If we fail to respond, please give us a friendly poke, because sometimes we do overlook or it gets put in a wrong folder. So just shoot us a reminder and a follow-up, and we'll get back to you guys. But I think everybody's seen recently the communications that Kenny and I have been shooting out to everybody. We try to just shoot that out from the branch board just to make sure you guys are kept in loop of that. But please, if you do not receive the Friday messages from EUSPBA, please, get in touch with us, let us know, or email EUSPBA directly, just so you guys can get the same updates that we get weekly. Mr. Jim Engel is here that and doing quite a lot of work during the week to make sure he's giving us the latest and greatest info. So please make sure you're getting that. If not, shoot us a message and we can help facilitate getting that through. Moving on, branch educational series. We have continued to work to expand that. That was part of previous chair's voice initiative, but we've had to due to COVID and the cost factor, we've had to, obviously move to our online platforms, which have been gone pretty successful, so to speak. And part of that is expanding the educational series. Jimmy McIntosh started that for all of us in EUSPBA and did an amazing job with the tools that were presented to him to use and post. If anybody's at Carnegie Mellon, I'm sure they're able to visit his Peabrick library up there at Carnegie Mellon Library. I know it's up there, but he did provide video tutorials to help us through Peabricks. And one of our educational initiatives is to help expand upon that. So we have requested assistance from other members in the branch and throughout EUSPBA to help us with that initiative. And that's to create videos similar to what Jimmy Mack did for us. So we are looking to expand upon the intro grade tune list that EUSPBA has on their website. So right now we have probably 4 individuals that are helping us kind of build that initiative and move forward. We're also going to look forward to expanding that for intro marches and stress phase and reels later down the road in further phases. So just keep an eye on that. Obviously, Kenny and the team will get those posted onto the websites and YouTube channel, so you guys can freely access that whenever you want. Put it up on your TV to practice at home, put your headsets on and play the pipes and listen to it from the great assistance that we have from people in the branch, as well as EUSPBA. So keep an eye on that. Transition on, looking at EUSPBA policy and rules. Every now and again, we get some questions from you guys regarding rules or some changes. I do recommend that you freely look at the EUSPBA policy manual. There's also a competition regulation manual on the EUSPBA website. Now, why would I want to read a 40-page document? You don't have to read all 40 pages, trust me. Flip to the page you need to reference and find your paragraph that affects the question you have. I do that frequently every week. If we see questions or if we are sent something, I'm like, well, I don't think that's right. And we'll double check. And usually you can just shoot straight to that paragraph or that section. And it takes not even a minute or two. So don't be afraid to hop on the website of EUSPBA. The manual has been updated. I know everybody up there put a lot of time and effort to update that. as well as those weekly emails that we talked about that are getting sent out. The recent updates were posted pretty lengthy in that email regarding the 50 and over, the grade 4 senior adjustments to make sure two-parter stress bay, two-parter reel, the membership question that was updated. So please refer to that. If you do have questions, though, we can help, forward it to you or post it on our site. Please let us know. But otherwise, just kind of reference that, okay? But don't be afraid to shoot us a message if you ever have a question on a ruling or something that used to be, or you think it's still the case and you just want to double check. Don't just shoot us a message. We have no problems reaching out to people to verify, what we're seeing in black and white is still the case, or if it's, in discussion for changes, because sometimes the music board is actually discussing that, and you'll see a further change. So just shoot us a message. We'll follow up with Jim Engel and the rest of the EC board to get you an answer. Up on that, we have upcoming competitions, which are few. I know right now within the branch, we have Smoky Mountain Games in Maryville, Tennessee coming up here pretty soon. Then you have Colonial, which is a virtual games. Deadline, I believe, is the first week of May. Then we have Loch Norman, which is virtual, very end of May, Memorial Day weekend. And I believe that is it until we get into the fall series, which we'll have a few more town halls so we can kind of discuss that. So with that being said, I'm going to transition over to Kenny so he can discuss the branch online contest and our branch council initiative.
All right. So like you just said, I'm going to be going over just a couple of items. First is going to be the online branch competition. We put it out there for anybody within the Southern branch wanting to get online, get their band together, put together a competition video. We had a pretty good turnout. So far, we've got 14 bands that are competing across grade 4 and 5. Hang on one second. I'm going to pull up a little infographic for everybody. This will work, right? But yeah, so it's going to be 5 bands in grade 4 and 9 in grade 5. We've got them from all across the Southern branch. It's taking a second for the file to load, so just going to keep on kind of pushing through. In the grade 4, we're going to have the Black Thistle Caledonian Pipe Band from Florida, Chattanooga Pipe Band, Tennessee, Dunedin High School Pipe Band from Florida, and Rosie O'Grady Highlanders from Florida, and Waken District Public Safety Pipes and Drums based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. And then in grade 5, this is our biggest grade. We've got the Charleston Pipe Band. We've got City of Memphis, Dunedin Highland Middle School, John Moore McIntosh Pipes and Drums, Mercer University Pipes and Drums, and the Palmetto Pipes and Drums, Queen City Juvenile, Rosie O'Grady, and Waken District. So this should be a pretty good set. This is at no cost to any of the bands, and it's just a chance to get together and compete again. We've had too much going on. We haven't been able to meet. This gives everybody a safe shot to jump together, play some tunes and have a good time. With that, let's see if I can get this next thing to pull up. We're going to cover our Southern Branch Council. So we have nailed down the first 5 members of the council. We're still working on adding more. We want to have as many members from across the branch as possible. The more people we can have, the better we can serve our bands, serve our solo members. So the first 5 members are going to be Dermot Palmer from Jamestown, Rusty Smith from the Atlanta Pipe Band, Courtney Schnee from Loch Norman, Hannah Boyles from Dunedin Pipe Band, and Eric Stein from Rosie O'Grady's. We're working on nailing down some more. Some of these members are even going to be on our new education board. Hannah is already talking about putting together some bass and tenor material. our bands can't get enough of that. We need more education for our midsections. So we're really working hard to give you guys some good outlets for getting your voices heard, and then, more educational tools to help better yourselves, your bands, your organizations, everything. With that, if Michael, you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody on the call have any questions? I know there's a few participants here, but we're also streaming on other platforms, so people are able to view this. But anybody on the Zoom have any questions or anything coming up? If not, we'll jump into the Q&A with Michael Gray.
Peter Armstrong, you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Peter.
A general comment, and that is, I've been in contact with Paige Turner at the Stone Mountain Games, and the Stone Mountain Park is turning the Highland Games upside down and backwards. But as of right now, talking with Paige, they are limiting, the park is limiting Stone Mountain to 16 bands. So that might be a point of, if people were planning on going to, normally, Stone Mountain has 30, 35 bands. The fields everything is rearranged differently, but for our purposes, 16 bands, that's it.
And is it like the first 16 to sign up?
I would assume so.
Okay.
I don't know how Paige is going to coordinate that.
Yeah, I think.
But the park is saying 16 bands. They don't care if it's 10 grade 5.
Yeah.
4 grade 4 and 2 grade 3. I'm pretty sure they don't care how Stone Mountain splits it out. So I don't know if Paige has figured that out, how she's going to if she's going to, limit the registrations for each grade, or just take the first 16. But I would expect that to be coming out here, shortly.
Yeah, let's stay in the loop together, Peter, and make sure that we can message that out as quickly as possible. And maybe if we can brainstorm, how to do that efficiently, I think that'll help the bands within the branch, because ultimately, if we've got bands that want to go and compete, we definitely want to make sure we get that message out. So it's like, if it's the first 16, it's the first 16. If, Stone Mountain, the games committee wants to invite bands, that's something that could be done too. I don't know. But I think it's up to the games committee and the organizers there. So let's definitely follow up after this over email, Peter, and see if we can maintain communication around that and any changes or updates that come out.
The only other comment, of course, is Charleston is on November 6th, new venue, not at Boone Hall Plantation. And for, talking with you, Michael, it's been designated as the Grade 3 Southern Branch Championship. And we have the Clan Donald Land Trust sponsoring the prize money of $3,000, $2,000, and $1,000, first, second, third.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for highlighting that. And do you know the new location?
Yeah, it's at Riverfront Park in North Charleston.
Awesome.
It's on the Charleston Scottish Society of Charleston, and then you go to the games link, and it's all there.
Awesome. Sounds great. I think somebody just shared it in the chat. Thank you for that, Peter. Really appreciate it. And definitely more to come, both on Stone Mountain and then the Charleston Grade 3 contest and the rest of the contests as well. So very excited that we're getting back in person. That's, very fun. I know that I got my second vaccine last week, and I know more and more people are getting vaccinated here in the Southern Branch, at least, and all across the United States. So it's great to hear that that's coming to fruition, because it's been a while. So anyway, any other questions or anything before we jump in? Going once, going twice. Cool. Let's get started. So very excited to have Mr. Michael Gray with us on the call. I posted almost 2 months ago, kind of a brief bio about Michael, but just to kind of highlight some of the things and some of his accomplishments. Right, he's written 7 books of music. One of his main teachers was John Wilson, one of the greatest pipers of the 20th century, which is awesome. 4-time winner of the North American Championship, Cowell Highland Gathering. One of the coolest facts I saw about Michael was that at the 1990 World Pipe Band Championships, more bands were playing his tunes than any other composer, living or alive. And that's a lot of people, because we've been playing bagpipes and drums for a very long time. Michael was also a founding member of the 78th Fraser Highlanders, and he led that band essentially as pipe sergeant to win the World Pipe Band Championships, and it was the first pipe band to win the World Pipe Band Championships outside of Scotland. Then moved over to Peel Regional in 1999, and also has played with Glasgow Police and Toronto Police, and has worked with numerous other bands and is an adjudicator as well. So I'm really, really happy to have him on the call, and to call him a friend. So Michael, we're just gonna kind of have a conversation around this. I have some questions, and I think that'll lead to other questions. And when we get closer to the end of the hour, I'm going to open it up to anybody that has any questions. So if people have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And if anybody can keep an eye on maybe the Facebook page, Kenny and Andrew, if there's any questions that come in, maybe we can field those at the end. So Michael, welcome. First question I have for you, very, very simple. How did you get into piping? How did that begin?
Let's see. I've always loved the sound of the pipes as a kid, and it's funny. I was talking with a co-leader in the Piper Society of Ontario today about how to get, what's the gap in Ontario with getting people involved, and one of them is how do people access bagpipes and drums if they want to learn. And when I was a kid, it was really hard. There was no internet, and my parents, I always wanted to play the pipes. So for about 3 years, I was quite late, by the way, learning, taking up the pipes. I was like 13. So I was like an old codger by today's standards, almost of any kind of standards. But I'd been wanting to learn since I was like 9 or 10. And my parents couldn't find anyone. And we lived in the west end of Toronto in the suburbs. And they happened to hear on a brass band radio program one Sunday afternoon about a kid's pipe band in the west end of Toronto that was teaching, pipes and drums, teaching kids to learn pipes and drums. And that's how I started with this Downsview Junior Pipe Band. By chance, my mom heard this ad, and that's how I started, which I think is kind of it kind of informs us as people involved in us. The 13 of us here in this group, informs on how, communication is so important, and never underestimate the power of one source, one voice of communication. So I think I lucked into it. I came to the love by family, but I lucked into it by a radio ad.
That's crazy. So a radio ad that your mom heard got you into piping. And do you remember like the first, practice or lesson you went to? Were there multiple people, or was it one-on-one?
I absolutely do. I do. I learned where I learned was in what I think based on my intensive and deep knowledge of American culture, based on living within, 45 minutes of the border of the United States. I learned in a place that's equivalent of the projects. And so Downsview is where I learned in the West End of Toronto, is a very, it was a very underdeveloped area, economically deprived. And the community center, as we called them and still do to this day, where I learned, was surrounded by these tall, 30-story apartments or flats that were housing new immigrants to Canada, and people that generally didn't have a lot of money, and probably a few dogs. And so this was the environment that I learned in, and it sure didn't do me any harm. But I do remember that the first tune I learned was, or the first lessons I learned was out of the Green Book, the old Green Book of the College of Piping. A plug to that. Seamus McNeil, Tommy Pearston, and yeah.
That's awesome, Michael. My dogs are going insane, so I'm going to get them to stop. But tell us tell me a little bit about your biggest influence in piping and kind of how that projected you to now have a career of plenty of piping. And I'm going to go yell at my dogs.
Sorry. Biggest influence. Biggest influence. I don't know. That's a big question. Because I came from, I think anyone's biggest, let's just look at any of our influences. Your family, the music they listen to, your parents, your parentage, where you came from. I think all of that influenced me. And I've always been interested in things Gaelic because of my dad's family. And so that's been a big influence. I recently did, or in the last, this whole pandemic thing makes things blur, as we all know. I was lucky to do a chat with the folks at the Royal Conservatoire, the program at the Piping Center and Royal Conservatoire, and the degree program for piping. And one of the things that was just as you asked, Michael, about influences, and it made me go back to my childhood as I quiver. A little joke there. And I think of my dad, who would on a Saturday afternoon would take out he had a very wide ranging perspective on what he liked in music. It went from, and I challenge you to Google this person, Ernest Sack, E-R-N-A, Ernest Sack, the ultra coloratura opera singer, to Gilbert and Sullivan, to Seamus McNeil. And he had a Seamus McNeil record, you'll know, was the co-founder of the College of Piping. And there's this famous green covered record of piping that Seamus made in I'm guessing the late 50s. And on a Saturday afternoon, after a few brews, my dad would put this record on and crank it up big time on the old, the old record player, and the whole house would hear it, but I loved it. I loved it. So I've always found I'm going on a little bit, but I think you people might relate to this, that there's something about the pipes that speaks to you. And for me, I say it was racial memory. It somehow triggered. But at the same time, Michael Iannuzzi, I don't know. Like, you got I'm thinking of your racial memory, and you must have a Macbeth or something back there in your parentage.
Maybe. I know I had a cousin that actually was a bass player that went over and lived in Scotland for years. And when I first started to get into piping and drumming, my grandparents were like, "What are you doing?" But you've got a cousin that lives over in Scotland. You should definitely hit him up. And when I was over in Europe, I did message him. That was the only time I ever spoke to him. But I'm not sure about that, Michael. But maybe. But I think the sound of the pipes for me as well was somewhat hypnotic, and it was something that I just became obsessed with it. So that leads me kind of to my next question. I was asked this question a couple weeks back about like a spark. Obviously you started learning the pipes. Do you remember like a first performance or an experience that you had playing out where you like just felt fulfilled and you felt that spark and you're like, I want to take this seriously? Because obviously you've had a band kind of career. You've also had a very successful solo career. Like, talk to us a little bit about that. If you can think of like a spark, and if you need a minute to think, I know you've been around a little while, so you've had a lot of experiences.
Yeah, but that's an interesting question, and I'm not sure I have a satisfying answer for you, Michael. I don't know. I have a feeling I'm going to give you like a really unsatisfactory answer to this, because I really can't think of one big spark, because it's all been sparky, like it's all been fun, and it's all been, I mean, for the most part, the things in it's like anything in life, it seems to me, it's not the bagpipes or the drums that make things or great necessarily. It's always the people around it. It's the people around it. So so probably the sparks, which I can't at this moment give you the sparky moment, but it's like it's so important that the people around you are they just inform and trigger and ignite the feelings you have when you play this music. So so I'm going to give you a hollow answer on this one.
I think that's fine. I mean, I think, there's peaks and valleys to this, and kind of on the flip side, competing and, ramping up other players and putting yourself out there is nerve wracking for a lot of people. And you've played at some of the highest level contests around. Do you recall a time when you failed, or when you suffered a failure in competition, or something didn't meet expectations? Does anything come to mind, and how did you get through that?
Yeah, about 100 things at least. But I'd like to put it back to you though, Michael, just before I, delve into that. Why ask the question? What makes you think people are afraid? What is that? What do you mean?
I knew you were going to do this, and this is exactly why I asked you to be on this, because I love that you challenge things.
Yeah, whatever. Challenge.
I think we set expectations, right, as young competitors and people that want to put themselves out there. And there are many people in the pipe band world that do not want to compete, period, right? And I think competition is necessary for growth, for personal growth, for getting sheets, for getting feedback, right? You can get it from your teachers or anything else like that. But I think we have an expectation of, delivering on the tunes that we're learning, or as a group or as a soloist. And, I think we definitely want to go out and we want to do well. And, I think competing within your own region, whether that's the Southern branch or any other branch of the Eastern United States Pipe Band Association, that's one thing. And then going, across the US, that's another thing to compete. And then going to Canada is a whole nother thing to compete. Right. And then going to Scotland's a whole nother thing to compete. But, I think some people sometimes get discouraged, and I'm wondering if you've had experiences like that come to memory, and that you're able to kind of think through, and like, what did you tell yourself? How did you get through that to prepare to go out the next time, even though you suffered a loss or you didn't meet expectations that you had?
So I kind of knew that's what you meant, just for the record, but I didn't like the question.
Good.
Yeah, I think you just, I want to answer that very quickly, because I want to spin that off to something else I want to put to you. So yeah, I've been disappointed a million times, and both because I played shittily or played greatly, and because the judges were so stupid and ignorant, and like, as competitors think, like, oh, they're totally biased, and like that's the real thing of our game. And I can assure people who think that way, they're almost assuredly almost always wrong. But based on my experience, having been there, that's how people think in the moment. And so I've had that happen a lot. And because I love the music and loved the music and love the music so much, that always made me persevere and carry on. Really, that's the long and the short of it. But if I can just kind of like, this is coming up. You guys know I've landed in this gig as president of the Pipers and Pipe Band Society of Ontario. And so I'm finding in my travels, there's this expression I don't like so much, and it's non-competing bands. And I think for all of us in the competitive world, which is a big part of some parts of the pipes and drums, we need to cut that out if we want to survive. We need to think of everyone as pipers and drummers, and we need to open our, we need to create value for everybody and stop putting a scarlet letter on bands that don't choose to put their hat in the ring and compete. And so I'm sort of on this hobby horse now about like trying to get to a place where we can create more value for those bands that opt not to compete and get score sheets and hear judgments from people who are accredited judges, but they get something else from playing their pipes and their drums. We're all the same, right? We all play the pipes. We all love the pipes and drums or play the pipes and drums. And so we need, I think, especially in the context of the 21st century worlds of diversity we live in, if we want to survive, we can't be too precious about competition and non-competition. And we've got to find a way to make that tent take everybody in, and not be judgy about people that ought not to do one thing or the other. So yeah, I can feel, I'm going to step off my sermon. Sorry, I'm sermonizing there.
No, I think it's a super valid point. And, being a part of a public safety band and public safety bands across, the US and other parts of the world, a lot of them are very adverse to that. And competition bands, I think there is, a stigma against bands that don't compete. And ultimately, I think COVID has definitely affected the pipe band world. And I'm interested your take on that, because I think, COVID expedited that kind of riff, right? And many people have not picked up. I know I've been in communication with pipers and drummers that are like, I'd love to come out and play. I'd love to do, some work with the branch or whatever, but I haven't picked up my pipes in 10 months, or I haven't picked up my sticks in a while. What do you think the impacts of COVID are going to be on the pipe band world as we come out of it?
Well, that's a really good, yes. I won't give you a grade on the question. I think that we will see. I think it's going to be a little bit of it. I think it's going to be an equalizer in the sense that we won't be so hard on assessing, as John Wilson said last Saturday at our global workshop, on the forensics of a pipe band performance. We'll look more at the overall joy or lack thereof that came out of a performance, the overall thing. I just a quick story for you. I was talking to, so we've got in Ontario, it's really shitty right now as regards COVID. We're at like a major third wave. It's the worst it's been since the pandemic. Not for deaths, but for cases. But it sucks, just sucks, the big one. And so we're essentially in a lockdown sort of situation. But I'm hopeful that we've still got a couple of games at the end of the back end of the summer, early fall, who've opted to hang on before they make a judgment on whether we should hold them or not. And I was talking to a couple of pipe majors, and one in particular who said, well, if we can't compete, if we can't get together as a band and play our pipes and drums, in like 2 months before the contest, there's no way we're going to do it. And I said, really? I said, after 2 years of this, I said, judges, I would wager, would be just let your lips sputter with joy. Let your lips flap and your wrists, just get outdoors and play, and don't worry about the standards. Just go and enjoy the music and love the music. And that's what I hope I hope the pandemic does something to amp down the competition and amp up the pure appreciation for the music.
I love that. I love that. You started talking about kind of changing perspectives, and I want to switch gears, and I want to play something, and I want to talk a little bit about it. You've been pretty experimental, and I think you've challenged the status quo in many ways when it comes to piping and drumming, specifically with competitive pipe bands. And I think you know what I'm about to play. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And maybe some people that are going to watch this have seen this, but I remember the first time I saw this video when I was in college at St. Andrews. I was like, what is this? What are they doing? And, coming to meet you later on in life, it's quite interesting. So I'm going to play a little bit of the beginning of this. And this is a competition set. And we'll talk a little bit about it here in a second. All right, so I think this is pretty interesting, just because it's so drastically different. And I'm trying to stop my screen share here. Let me see. All right, I think we're back. To me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, right? And this might be ignorance here, but like this was the first time a band was going in without the 3-pace rolls at the beginning of a set, correct?
No.
When was the first time?
It was the 78th Fraser Highlanders with Lag and Love. This was 1980. Sorry, Michael. It's just, I want to keep it right. About 1984. And the band, as I walk, bear with me. No, it was 1983 in Ontario, and it was the 70th Fraser Highlanders, and it was a crescendo roll into so no, that wasn't the first time, but that was the last time. So from 1983 to 2008, and I was there with the band in 1983, just saying.
So what was the initial response to this? Because I think it's so different from what we expect. And I think, having the privilege to work back and forth with you on creating medleys has been awesome. But I think you've definitely challenged the status quo around the way that I've thought about composing sets and writing drum music. But I think for you, what was the initial reaction? Because I know in this competition that I shared, you guys took second place. Drumming took first. You know, great drummers. Tom Foote there, a good friend of mine. So it's great to see that. But tell me about like what was the reaction to that, either with the 78th, the first time that happened, or with Toronto Police?
So the reaction was it was absolutely because it was really it was a redux. It was a revisiting of my experience with the early 78s where we were treated like rock stars. Now this time around, and that's I can talk about that, but I don't think it's going to help this conversation. But this variations on a theme, because what was different from the time when the 78s of the vintage of my vintage of the 80s when they won the Worlds and all that, there was no internet, at least per se, but there was indeed in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, through those periods of the Toronto Police. And my God, the reaction was just fantastic. And I say fantastic because it was, people loved that stuff. They loved it. You heard that there was like at least two, like in situ crowd, like, yeah. Oh, there was so much hate. There was so much hate. And there was like stuff on YouTube where they wanted the composer dead. So that was like not good. Like I wasn't loving that. So there was it was just visceral, great from the gut. So people loved it or hate it, which is as many, including me, always say is the definition of art. You either love it or hate it. There's no shrugs. So it was like majorly, there was a major reaction. All right.
Did you see different feedback from judges, or were all the judges? I mean, obviously you took second, so there was positive feedback on it. But
I think in hindsight, you know what? I think we kind of peeled back as a weakness in our game, in that, like, imagine springing that onto judges, like human beings who are used to something, and then we spring that on them. Which I must admit, the person of that time, the person that was of that time, I loved it. But thinking back now, is a little more mature thinking, that was a really prickish thing to do. And so I felt for them, and they did well. And we were lucky to get, I think, second in piping with that. Because they were like trying to process it, right? Like it was just freaking nuts to them, which it probably still is freaking nuts to this day. That's for future people to decide. I do think it has merit, but you know what I mean? Like it was, but boy, oh boy, the reaction was like massive. And we went to Scotland the next year, and we knew we weren't competitive in grade 1, which I think is a good thing for bands to recognize in their various grades, if you're competitive or not. Like, make that guide where you go. We knew that the Worlds probably wasn't for us, but we loved the idea of going to Cal Games and playing this medley. So we did, and the whole trip to Cal Games next year was fraught with politics and drama. For instance, the band was tuning up at Cal Games. We already decided that we weren't going to start with we weren't going to do that, because that would be, you'd really be flicking your nose at the rules. And no, we weren't going to do that. We're going to follow the rules. We tweaked it a bit, but the EUSPBA was super, super worried about us doing that and then causing major shit. So when we were tuning up, the chairman of the EUSPBA actually came over. Ian K. McDonald was the pipe major at the time, and he was tuning chanters, and I was the pipe sergeant, so I was standing there like this. And so the chairman came over to me and said, just want to make sure that you're not starting, you will be starting with a 3-pace roll. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so can you imagine? Like, that's weird, where the
Yeah.
chairman of the organization comes to a band and asks for your commitment that you're going to start with a 3-pace roll.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. That's like crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could probably talk for another hour on just like the philosophy behind that and the rules and everything else, but I want to shift gears. And there was a good question that was asked, and I want to get some tips for some of the bands that are going to be watching this video later on, or anybody that's watching it now. So I asked you a question about the spark, right? And I want to ask this question in two parts. How did it feel? And maybe it was your own band that you heard playing some of your tunes at first, but what did it feel like when you walked on the field at any of the major championships and you heard other bands playing your music? And then now, do you feel that spark when you hear a younger generation playing the tunes that you've written?
I think so. Yeah, I do. I do. But I think that in creating art, it involves a lot of ego. I think that goes, and that's not an original thought. And so the younger me would say, well, of course, they've got good taste. They're playing good tunes. And the less brash, self-absorbed me, so I flatter myself, would be like, I just love hearing, that's just so great. It's just great. But I think we need to acknowledge that in this game, there's a lot of ego, and there's a lot of ego that's not stated. And that goes for people who compose tunes and people who score tunes and people who lead the tunes that are composed. I mean, it's just like, and that's why this whole game of ours, and we complicate it by competition, which is a whole new level of complexity in managing. And so it's amazing that organizations like ours, the EUSPBA and the Pipers and Pipe Band Society of Ontario, the art, like it's really it's quite fascinatingly interesting that we've managed to keep these organizations going in the context of all this competition.
Talk to me about composing, right? Like when you started composing, I remember the first like drum score that I composed, right? I started just taking pieces of multiple drum scores and just kind of copy and pasting them together. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good, right? Now thinking about the pipe music, and obviously that's evolved over time, but did you have classical training in composing music scores, or was it all just piping? And like, do you remember kind of your first composition? Because I mean, you've written a lot of music and compiled a lot of music over the years.
That's it. So no to the training, explicit training, but I have immersed myself in the music of this instrument. I think I have, I think back to because there's a big movement to training composers now. We've got the National Pipe. Actually, I won't even go there. I look back to the beginnings of our tradition with the McCrimmons and with, John Van Mackenzie and Sandy Cameron and the Camerons, and we go through all this. And they were only trained, word of mouth. They weren't given any kind of classical training per se, although they probably did get a classical sort of training. So how was it that this group of people managed to create this canon of music without having, the Berklee School or any of the great musical academies involved? Like, really, this is where I start to, I find myself pushing back on a little bit and on accreditations, a little bit, not a lot, on these kinds of formalities related to our music. And Michael, I feel I'm kind of fading from your question.
No, I think you answered it right, but it's always interesting when I remember my dad went to Berklee College of Music for percussion and like film score writing, and I remember showing him a piece of pibroch, right, and he was like, "What the hell is this? Right? What is this? What is this?" And I'm like, "This bagpipe music," and he's like, "This is interesting, right?" And being classically trained by one of the best music schools, he was like, "What is this? I don't understand it." But to me, I'm like, "You just don't get it. You just don't get it." And I had to explain it to him, and he absorbed it. But I just think I think you're spot on with that, and I think people should experiment more with writing and composing, and then going back and forth with people within the association, because there's great writers within the association, and if younger players or bands are starting to compose their own tunes, go back and forth with people, because there's plenty of people that would give feedback on that. So making best use of time, you've taught a lot of players too, I'm sure, and when thinking of bringing up younger players, what do you think is the biggest thing to focus on as they're developing, let's say in grade 5 to grade 4, because that's probably the bulk of the association is lower grades. What advice would you have as an adjudicator, a teacher, and a player yourself?
Well, forget the adjudicator thing. Just as a person who loves the pipes and wants to see people take it up, it's all about inspiration. And for me, a teacher, the core of a job, whether you're teaching a master class or teaching a kid to put their hands on the chanter properly, or their wrists on the sticks properly, it's all about inspiring them to go to the next week, to the next lesson. It's about inspiring them. I used to be very particular about, you must learn the Scots tunes that are the simple Scots airs and melodies that are the roots of a lot of the simple repertoire. And I'm thinking, no, like if you can learn a pop tune that's being put on the chanter, so kids will take it up, I'm good with that. I think that's good. So they can move their fingers and make grace notes to whatever. I don't want to date this too much, this discussion. I'm hoping it is seen, but I think whatever it takes to get people in our modern times to take up what is essentially an immodern music form, I think that is what's important, and we need to be flexible with that.
The kind of final question that I'm thinking of, as you talk about modernizing piping, I think of composers like Lincoln Hilton and many others that you're hearing, younger players composing great tunes, and major bands are playing that music. Are there any great composers that you're hearing right now, younger composers that really stick out to you, where you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like that.
I think I'd be putting myself in a really tricky situation if I answered that, Michael. But I will say that what I recommend to anyone that's interested in composing this kind of music is that they immerse themselves first into the traditional canon. It's the only word I can think of at the moment, but the traditional basket of music, the marches, spades, reels, airs, all that stuff. That get to know the structure of the tunes and the formats, and get to know all that, so you don't repeat it. Because I will say that I often hear stuff that's new, and I think that is far too emblematic or reminiscent of that to be called a new piece of music. And I kind of worry about that. But then again, I have a feeling that's the way this music rolls.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, any questions from the group that are on? I know we're right at 8, so right on the dot. I know I asked you a lot of questions, Mike, and I really appreciate your perspective and your guidance. I think that's great, and it's definitely helped me become a better player, and I think many other people as well. I had more questions I wanted to ask you, but I want to turn it over in the last couple minutes to see if anybody else has any questions that's on the call, or if there's anything that we've seen online. Give it just a minute. Going once, going twice. We've covered a lot, Mike. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking this time and chatting with us. And I know we'll connect soon. So definitely appreciate it. And that will conclude this month's town hall. Thank you everyone for joining. Anybody that's watching this on the web, thank you so much. Make sure to like any of our pages or social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as check out our website. But look forward to seeing you guys in 2 months. Thanks so much.